So we're talking about how the federal judge blocked Biden administration officials from communicating with social media companies, right? Well, look how the New York Times covers it, right? They go, ruling puts social media at crossroads of disinformation and free speech. So listen to this. The judge quotes bad science or just lies. There's no way the judge doesn't know this is a lie. So this guy tweets out, he says, this is an absolutely extraordinary passage in a New York Times article from yesterday about the court ruling against the government's right to suppress speech on social media. It cites a correct statement as evidence of a judge referring to a debunked claim. Let me read it to you. I'll read it to you. So the New York Times, this case where the judge told Joe Biden that you can no longer communicate with social media to censor Americans. The New York Times doesn't like this judge. The New York Times wants Joe Biden to censor Americans, and so this is how they write the article. And it is being overseen by Judge Terry A. Doherty, who was appointed by President Donald J. Trump and has previously expressed little skepticism about debunked claims from the vaccine. Which debunked claims? Well, the New York Times says the claim that COVID-19 vaccines do not prevent transmission of the disease. He's saying that that claim has been debunked. That's what the New York Times is saying. That claim has not been debunked. That is the science. Even now, Pfizer admitted in a testimony in the European Parliament that not only does it not stop the transmission, they didn't even test to see if it did. They didn't even test to see if it stopped the transmission of the virus. Now, this is the New York Times. Now, we've known this now for at least over a year that testimony happened. And I've been reporting it for 2 years on this show that the vaccine didn't stop the transmission of the virus. I got a strike for it from YouTube because they said that was misinformation. They were lying. It's not misinformation. What they want me to say is that it slows the spread and transmission and contraction of the virus. That's what they want me to say. So I just said it. In one previous case, Judge Doherty accepted as fact the claim that COVID-19 vaccines do not prevent transmission of the disease. That is a fact.
That's a fact.
The New York Times, this is July 2023, is still lying at the top of their lungs. By the way, they don't want you to like this judge. They want you to know he was appointed by Donald Trump. Mm-hmm. Do you know that he was confirmed by a Senate vote of 98-0? That means every Democrat in the Senate voted for him. That's what this means. So the judge, what are you going to do? The judge also has a mortgage to pay. The judge also probably has drug addict kids he has to put through drug rehab. He needs a paycheck, is what I'm saying. And that's why this judge is doing this. That's why the New York Times writer is doing, not the judge. That's why the New York Times writer is doing this. I get it. The government's action at the heart of the case were intended large. This is what the New York Times says. The government's action, meaning Joe Biden censoring you, is at the heart of the case, was intended largely as public health measures. The reason why Joe Biden and the government wanted to censor you on social media wasn't because they gave a shit about your health. If they did, they'd give you health care. The reason why they did that is because they work for Big Pharma. That's why they did that. They wanted to censor anybody who was skeptical of the COVID narrative because it would affect the bottom line of Big Pharma. But on Tuesday's order, instead, viewed the issue through the filter of a partisan culture war. No, you're doing that, New York Times. This is classic Jungian projection. You're right. The one doing this. Asking, because you're lying about the science. Asking whether the government violated the First Amendment by unlawfully threatening the social media companies to censor speech that Mr. Biden's administration found distasteful and potentially harmful to the public. They think that's making it partisan. It goes on. In another case, Judge Doherty wrote that a top Biden official requested that Twitter remove a parody account linked to Finnegan Biden. That's Hunter Biden's daughter and President Biden's granddaughter. He wrote that 45 minutes after the request, Twitter suspended the account. So this is what the New York Times says is Well, I don't know what is that they're okay with that? The New York Times put that in there to try to, does that discredit? Why? So that's how warped the people's brains are today, Mark, who read the New York Times, that they can read that and think that that's a good thing.
Right.
They read that and they see that a parody account got taken down on social media, and the people who read the New York Times thinks that's a good thing, and they put that in there to make you hate that judge. The judge did the right thing. There's more to this. This is amazing. After Vivek Murthy, the Surgeon General, urged social media companies to take action against misinformation super spreaders. You know who the misinformation super spreaders was? Dr. Fauci, Walensky at the CDC, Collins at the NIH, everybody in corporate media, and Joe Biden and everybody in government. They were the super spreaders of misinformation, and people like me and Mark Crispin Miller and Joe Rogan and every other doctor that got suppressed, they're the ones who were spreading information, and the New York Times is still spreading misinformation about the virus and the COVID vaccine till this day. So what did they do? In July 2021, the companies took down information posted by 17 accounts linked to the Disinformation Dozen, a group of people who frequently distributed false anti-vax. No, those were people who got it right. Those were scientists who were pushing back against the lies from Dr. Fauci, the FDA, and the CDC, and the NIH, and corporate media. They got the Disinformation Dozen, were people like Dr. Robert Malone, who got it right. And everybody else got it. Not only did they not get it right, they were lying. Pfizer lied. Dr. Fauci lied. Walensky lied at the CDC. Dr. Collins lied. They lied to you. They lied to you about everything. They lied to you about transmission and contraction. They lied to you about the origin of the virus. They said you were a white supremacist if you thought it came from the funding, the research that they funded. That's why they called you a white supremacist, because they funded the making of the COVID-19 virus, which makes them liable for the deaths of millions of people. And that's why they lied and discredited anybody. They lied about masks. They lied about herd immunity. They lied about natural immunity. They lied about everything. They lied about the intervals when you should take the vaccine. They lied about everything. And they are going after these people because they were onto their lies. But the New York Times likes their lie, likes going after people telling the truth. And so the people reading this, to me, that's the interesting part. That people who read the New York Times can read this article and not be angry at the New York Times, but they're going to be angry at a judge for sticking up for free speech as the New York Times continues to lie about the vaccine and COVID. And 17 accounts, right? So they took down 17 accounts posting misinformation, and they called it the Disinformation Dozen. Why would they can't even get the number straight? Did you want alliteration that badly? That's what this is. They wanted alliteration. Why not call it the Sloppy 17? I mean, you got 5 other accounts just sitting there. So that's the New York Times lying still to this day about COVID, about a judge ruling saying that you can't stop suppressing, the government can't suppress people telling the truth about COVID anymore. New York Times says those people telling the truth about COVID are telling you lies, and the judge is siding with lies. The exact opposite. Up is down, black is white, in and out. And this isn't considered misinformation. And YouTube considers New York Times a trusted news source, a reliable news source, and I'm not. So that's why we get suppressed, and that's why the New York Times, because they all work for Big Pharma and the military-industrial complex and the Department of Defense. That's what all this is about. That's why Fauci was the highest paid person in the federal government, because he worked for the Department of Defense, which is what, as Mark mentioned, if you know anything about this, started this whole thing with COVID. Mark, let me bring you in. Anything you want to say about the New York Times just blatantly lying like that about that judge and the judge's decision, and still lying about COVID and the vaccine?
Yeah, I want to say something about that. You know, the idea that the Times would think it's okay for the president to act like an emperor, find, something online distasteful because it makes fun of his own family, he would make a call, and that offending item would be immediately deleted. Right? The New York Times think this is fine. I remember back in October of 2016 when the Times highlighted a review of a new book, a new biography of Hitler that had come out of Germany. You may remember this. It was by Michiko Kakutani, who was like their veteran book reviewer. This is a month before the 2016 election. And the whole review was a lightly veiled equation of Adolf Hitler with Donald Trump. Okay. There were all these, facts about Hitler mentioned that were sort of slanted to sound like Trump was the same thing. Trump was Hitler. Trump was Hitler. That kind of propaganda really registered with everybody on the so-called left who have thought that Trump is a kind of fascist. But the kind of, extreme authoritarianism that they forgive in Biden, and that they'll attack a judge for trying to, interfere with, they accuse Trump of that kind of thing. The confusion, the complete insanity of the way they think is really troubling. I mean, more and more, 1984 reads less like a satire, which is what Orwell meant it to be, and more like prophecy, because we're really living in the world that he describes. Where up is down and black is white. And this is not just an abstract intellectual issue, Jimmy. I mean, what you don't know can kill you, all right? What you don't know can kill you. And all too many people have been jabbed and boosted, and excess mortality rates are skyrocketing all over the world. It just came up in the British Parliament, where there's a new analysis on Substack just today about the close relationship between excess mortality worldwide and vaccination rates. I mean, it isn't just the COVID vaccines don't prevent the transmission of the disease. It's that the COVID vaccines are far more lethal than the disease itself.
Well, Mark, I have to.
We're not allowed to talk about this.
Yeah, well, I have to correct you because the vaccines, as you know, are safe and effective, and they will.
I forgot.
They are safe and effective, and what you're saying is incorrect, and that they will prevent you from serious illness, hospitalization, and death. And they've saved millions of lives. They're fantastic. My heart is swelling with pride from the from the pride from the vaccine, not from the vaccine, from the pride I feel from having taken 2 of those jabs. So I just had to. I have to correct you, and the audience knows that you're wrong. So that's the good thing. Sorry to interrupt you. Do you want to say something else?
No, you put me in my place.
Okay.
I won't make that mistake again. I promise.
Well, Mark Crispin Miller, it's been a joy to talk to you, and I really appreciate the work you're doing and your voice out there. And I hope you come back to the show sometime. I really enjoyed talking with you.
Same here.
And I hope everybody can check out your Substack called Notes from Underground.
News from Underground.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
News. It says notes on my paper. Okay.
That's disinformation.
That is this. Mark, thank you so much for being here. We'll hope to talk to you again soon.
Okay, same here. Thanks a lot.
Hey, come see us on tour. We'll be in Baltimore, San Francisco, Huntington Beach, Rosemont, and Chicago, Las Vegas, Salt Lake City, New York City, Pottstown, Pennsylvania, Stamford, Connecticut, and more, and St. Louis. Go to jimmydore.com for a link for all our tickets for all our shows.